I was surrounded as a young child by all of these incredibly strong women who built community,
Hmm.
who really didn't see only their family as a community, but, everybody else's. And
Hmm.
it's that kind of woman, which Gran is one of them, that I wanted to explore.
Welcome to our latest episode of Book Reporter Talks to, where our return guest today is Nita Prose, and we're going to be talking about her latest novel, The Maid's Secret, which is the final book in her series featuring Molly the Maid. It's a Book Reporter Bets on Selection once again, and we also have some praise for The Maid's Secret, including this from author Lucy Foley, a glorious read, intrigue, heart, and humanity in spades. So dead on. Booklist said there's a happy ending for everyone in this feel good adventure. And Publishers Weekly, in a starred review, called it an art heist plot with a juicy love story full of class, conflict, and family drama. I love these. I love the way they've seen this book. And with that intro, welcome, Nita. It's so nice to see you again.
I'm so happy to be here, Carol. Thank you, thank you, thank you for having me back.
This is like, so much fun because I've been with this series like from the beginning. I've read, all four books. And it's just such fun to see how you wrapped this. So let's start out with you telling us about The Maid's Secret, and then we're going to get back to like a little bit of the history.
Well, I'd say that this book is a little different from the others. I kind of thought, well, if we have another murder at the Regency Grand, who is ever going to believe that? How many murders can you have in the same hotel before we go, oh, this is ridiculous. Nobody's going to go there anymore.
The reservations are going to be down. There we go.
They're going to be down. So
True.
I had to change it a little bit. So in this novel, Molly's doing really well. She's gotten some promotions at the Regency Grand. Not only is she head maid, but she's also in charge of the tea room now, head of special events. And so she and Juan are doing well as a couple. And she goes into work one day because there's an exciting taping that's happening in the tea room. And this is a taping of a show called Hidden Treasures, which, Carol, it looks a lot like Antiques Roadshow. And I love Antiques Roadshow. So
Perfect.
so that's what's being taped there. Molly's allowed to bring in a few trinkets and antiques of her own. So she brings in some teacups and one other item that used to belong to her Gran to be appraised by these celebrity appraisers on TV. And lo and behold, one of those things in her little shoebox turns out not to be an ersatz thing, but the real thing indeed. Molly goes from rags to riches in a single heartbeat. She becomes a multi-millionaire, but no sooner does she realize that she's in the possession of an incredibly precious object than it disappears in a heist from the hotel. So that's the present tense, but we also go back to the past to a dramatic star-crossed love story with a new protagonist, Gran. We get to hear from Gran for the first time and enter this upstairs, downstairs, Downton Abbey-esque world where we really see the history behind Gran.
I absolutely loved it. I love that description of it too. And instead of a murder, we've got a heist. Instead of this, we've got that. And then we really do get to Gran, and she stars. She's got her own chapters. So we actually hear her voice. So we're not just hearing about her from Molly, we're actually hearing what she'd say. So tell us about writing her as a character instead of just someone that Molly thinks and opines about. Like you really had to fully form her.
That was challenging, mostly because I doubted myself. Writers always say that old adage of write what you know. Well, what do you know, though? That is the question. And for me, it's like, well, I'm not an octogenarian. I'm not a Gran. I'm a little younger than yet, but I'm getting there quickly. And I actually land this character. When Molly came to me, she came as a lightning bolt. That I did not have to work very, very hard for that voice. I always think that writers get one gift from the gods. And
Mm.
Molly was my gift from the gods. She just landed fully formed. I heard that voice. I knew it. I lived it. I felt I could sit behind those eyes and deliver that experience to the reader. But then to change voices within the series, I really did doubt myself at first. I'm like, can I do this? Can I really understand Gran, this older woman, much, much older than me? And then I realized I could, that I've always been an old soul, not unlike my protagonist, and that I knew this woman. I knew her deeply, and I just had to trust that I could take us all the way there.
So had you decided that it was going to be the end of the series? Like, did you decide this was going to be the last book and try to think about how to make the last book different? So, like going into this, what was your challenge?
I definitely knew we were heading towards an ending. And that I wanted to write some new characters after this too, but that to land that, I had to deliver to the reader something extra special,
Hmm.
and I knew that was going to mean giving more than just Molly's voice. And certainly I had thought in the past, can I really deliver a full story behind Gran? And there were all sorts of little threads that had been dangled before. But it's not like I held all the answers to her past in my head.
Right.
I held all the questions. The hard part is when you actually sit down and ask yourself, can I deliver on these promises that I've dangled in the past? And can I really create a new storyline that is going to deliver that feeling that I've wanted throughout the whole series? By the time we get to the end, we have moved ourselves through a journey of experience. We've sat behind the eyes of, in this case, two different women, and we've come out the other side, even though we've gone through some difficulties, with that feeling of hope intact.
Exactly. And I feel like you completely delivered on that, which was such a challenge because you knew how Molly felt about Gran, what was Gran saying back to her, and what were her experiences all the way. Did you write all the Gran chapters first? Like, did you do that whole arc of that story and then go back?
I didn't. And I think I'm a very organized chronological writer, generally speaking. It's very hard for me to write out of order. But in these chapters, for me, there was this kind of dovetailing and a symmetry, not necessarily in the time or the pacing, but in the symbolism behind it.
Mhm.
So for me, one chapter really had to mirror the other, which meant I couldn't just separate them. They had to be side by side. And hopefully the reader discovers that there are so many similarities between Molly's experiences and Gran's, even though they're separated by generations and through time.
I think that'd be such an interesting thing for a book of discussion. When somebody sits down and does it, this book group is going, what's happening here and what's happening here, and experience the writing, not just the story. Because a lot of times we get caught up in what the story is, but how do we get to that story? How do we get to manipulating these different parts around it? And I think that's really interesting. You've talked about thinking about your mom as you wrote Gran. So did you have a lot of thinking about your mom as you were writing this book? Because there had to be some lines that you were just saying, I know that line. I've heard it before.
For sure. Yes. And as you would know from us having talked about the entire series
Exactly.
in detail, in fact, my mother was in very much one of the inspirations for Gran, but not only my mother, also the kind of matriarch she surrounded herself with. I was surrounded as a young child by all of these incredibly strong women who built community,
Hmm.
who really didn't see only their family as a community, but, everybody else's. And
Hmm.
it's that kind of woman, which Gran is one of them, that I wanted to explore. But the interesting thing about her is when we meet her as a young person, she's entirely different. She's not that steady woman with this solid moral compass, and this good grace about her. She's different. She
Hmm.
has to learn to become the woman she is.
Hmm.
And she comes from a class of such extreme privilege that at the beginning she's almost unrecognizable in a lot of ways. She behaves with selfishness. She believes in her righteous, and wondrous goodness just by the grace of being in a higher social class than other people around her. And she has to unlearn that. It is
Hmm.
life that teaches her the experience that actually we are all the same in different ways.
Yeah.
Something that she then in turn passes along to Molly.
Yeah, and I think that as you're sitting and reading it, you're seeing this woman of privilege that becomes this, and also how she looks at privilege at that part. The John is beneath her. These people are beneath her. These people are. not as good as she is. She's smarter and she does better. And no one else, what? Well, wait. You're not in my class and you're getting the same grade as me. How could you get the same grade? And when someone does a little bit better than she does, like what's going on? And why does she walk away from this education that she's headed towards? And it's very interesting to see how people are they're a product of where they are and where they live and what they're taught along the way there. And there's so many good examples in this story of who you are and what you are and how quickly on a dime that can change. And then who
That's
are
right.
you and what are you? You
And
know?
you have choices. There are two roads diverging in the Yellow Wood all the time, right?
Right.
And morally, Gran keeps choosing, and she chooses a path towards goodness, but
Hmm.
she didn't have to.
No.
She could have chosen differently, and obviously her family always chose differently, and that
Always.
makes them really, you know, unbearable people in a lot of ways. But I wanted to explore the notion of a woman who is born with everything and decides to give it all away because the thing she always wanted, love, she actually didn't have in the beginning. Not
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, there was not that kind of feeling. There wasn't a kind of encouragement. There wasn't, they didn't care about her reading. They didn't care about her doing those things. That's not,
Yeah.
last week my husband was watching the Masters on TV and they brought in this picture of the private jets that were all lined up, one jet after the other. It was some ridiculous number that were there. And I'm just thinking, well, what, your jet is bigger than mine? Like you can fit, like,
Jet envy.
and I've actually been with people who say they have, like, I said, oh, you got a plane. Like, just got a plane, not a jet, but a plane. And they're like, yeah, but so and so's plane is bigger than mine is. And when you really read and you look at even wealth and whatever goes along, there's so many other things that happen along the way that that is not just the secret to happiness. And I think that Grant is showing this to us in the book that that was the life, but it's not the life anymore, and it's not what's going on. And
Yes.
I feel that too much right now is on material wealth, material. When you hear of people that are young influencers and how much money people are making, and they're 12 or 13 or things like that. So there's this equation of, let's see, success is being somebody that everybody watches that makes a lot of money. And that is what success is. And it's not other things that might be more altruistic. And I feel like when I'm reading these books, it's like a mantra of let's think about what we're really doing, folks. Let's think about what people are really, because you reach a point where it's like, okay, becoming this is not going to happen, but becoming that can, still can. And that's what I think you're bringing out in the book.
That is certainly what I'm trying to show. We have a rags to riches story and a riches to rags story,
Mhm.
but where they converge in that X is around happiness. It doesn't matter how much you have or don't have. The question is, how do you preserve what matters most?
Well,
And obviously when you have very little, that is hard. That can be difficult, right?
that's not there. And we also get to meet some other character. We get to meet Molly's mother, who has been alluded to in books, but we don't really know about. And what made you decide to let us visit her now instead of just in Gran's memories and sharing with us?
Molly lives outside of her generation, right? She's brought up by her gran, and her mother is a shadowy figure who we've learned a little bit about and seen her in brief snippets before, but very, very little. And I wanted to explore the notion of found family, really. This mother is no good for Molly. There is a reason why she's not in her life and why Gran has gone sort of out of her way to keep it that way.
Mhm.
And we learn why. And Molly then is faced with the choice of herself. Is she going to invite her birth mother back into her life, or isn't she? And why not?
Mhm.
Molly is somebody who has learned the very hard way to surround herself with people who will truly love and respect her, who
Mhm.
will respect her for her differences and who see those differences as her greatest strength.
Mhm.
And she has accumulated a found family around her that really does value the same things that she does.
Mhm.
And I wanted to show that through the biggest challenge of all, her being presented with her own mother and
Mhm.
having to decide whether her mother is going to treat her with that similar respect
And is
or
her
not.
mother on the right path, or not.
That's right.
And she can sit there and say, my mother's taking this path. I'm not going this way. I'm not going to look this way because I've learned that you can have all the money, but it doesn't really matter. You can have all of this and it doesn't really matter. You know?
Yep.
So when you sat down to write the first Molly book, and we know where the that came from, you were being in the hotel room and having walking back and seeing the maid in your room. Did you have any idea this was going to be a series? Did you have any thought that this was going to be anything beyond one book?
Oh, absolutely not. I did not play. I did not have a master plan at all, Carol. I had no plan, as you know. So, that has been the trickiest part is to find more tapestry and runway book by book.
Right.
Now, I was lucky with the mystery guest and something occurred to me. I had it again. Sometimes I'll have these bolts out of the blue where I'll be delivered somewhere and suddenly see how there's a whole new narrative that I can explore. And, you know, writing is a very mysterious thing.
Yeah.
For me, that fertile ground between knowing and not knowing is like perfect. I knew in The Maid's Secret where we would end,
Right.
what would happen in the end, and how we would get there. I had no earthly clue. And for me, that is the secret to writing. So I'm not either a plotter or a pantser. I'm a plantser. I'm right in between. I need to know a few things, but all that not knowing is actually what motivates me to
Right.
find the path.
Right. And I feel like right now we have to sell the series by color. Okay. We're going to go with this. What order do I read these in? Well, you start with this and they're all primary colors. So it's really pretty simple. There's no pink in there, no purple. It's like real primary here, guys. This is what to do. So funny. So funny. So you kind of knew this was going to be the end of the series. You were sort of feeling that you were sort of out of turf. You'd killed enough people at the hotel. You'd done the holiday book, like we'd done, like just about everything we could do with the character. So wrapping it up, did it feel like you just went to the publisher? Or who did you make the decision with? Your agent, your publisher? Where'd the conversation on that one come from?
I made the decision myself. My publishers and my agent would have been quite happy for me to continue the series. But I always said about this character and the series is I will not give readers more and give them less at the same time. Each
Mhm.
book I wanted to offer more than I gave before and to make sure that readers never had that feeling, which we can sometimes have in series where we're like, I like the first one or I like the second one, but now we're on number 85 and I am disappointed.
Right.
I wasn't going to do that to my readers out of respect because they have taken Molly and they've cared for her in ways I could have never foreseen and which that really has given me a sense of hope and a restoration
Mhm.
of my feeling of goodness with the
You say
world.
that word, goodness. It's like goodness.
Just
It's the goodness
goodness.
of people. Yes. It's a good.
People have an innate goodness, and they've shown me that, and I was going to do nothing to offend it. So that is why I felt this is the final book. Going beyond this is going to create a jump the shark scenario that readers don't deserve, and that this character does not deserve, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, and there's so many times where you're reading, we made the character younger now, or we did this with them now, and it just doesn't work because it's not unfolding. This was a character, she's maturing, but we bring in this other character, and it's sort of the wrap. It's like it's tied with, like I say, a neat bow, and it's like the bow, like came together, and that's really huge. When you were you making any notes when you were doing the earlier books about, I mean, you were drawing out who Gran was, and you're drawing out who Molly was. So I feel like you laid the groundwork yourself by writing the rich character of Gran before. Were you pulling from that, like saying, okay, she's got to be this and this, but let's give her this other evil personality that she was, or, not as accepting personality as she was when I'm writing the finale, like when I'm pulling it out.
I did not think about that in advance. I knew in advance that she was a wealthy woman and that her background was going to be mysterious throughout most of the books until this one.
Right,
But I did not know that. These
right.
are discoveries that one makes and a sort of intuition to like drop clues for yourself really to figure out that new tapestry later on. I didn't know that I was doing that, but in the end, that is what I was doing.
What you were doing, yeah. Yesterday I was putting out Easter eggs. We didn't dye anything because it makes too much of a mess. So we didn't do that, but I've got all these little things and I was putting them out. And I was thinking about the egg in this book, and that's a treasure. So we're not going to give, anything away. And I kept thinking how clever it was with the saying, all of your eggs in one basket. And he's one good egg. And did you always know that an egg was going to be something special in this book? Because it was just, there's so many ways that you use the word egg when I was rereading notes this morning. And I was like, that's really funny. It's kind of wry of what's going on here.
Again, I did not plan this, but your subconscious speaks to you in weird ways. I feel like somewhere in the deep depths of my mind, there is an antique store
Hmm.
full of little trinkets that I pull down and I bring into this series. That has been from the very beginning.
Right.
There's some weird little space in my head where objects hold meaning, past, history, and values, and then I can take them down and attach story to them. And certainly I did that at the very beginning in the Maid when the Fabergé means something else. The
Right.
Fabergé only means in that book what Gran calls their bank account, their savings account.
Right. Right.
And then we have to unfold all the layers as we move book by book about what the Fabergé actually means.
Right. And I love that it was a bank account at the beginning. It's like the bank account is our Fabergé, da da da. You always, once again, use one of my favorite lines. I folded down the page. Everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. We've talked about this is one of our favorite lines. I've got this framed. And it really hits the right note in this last book. And I know, we've talked about this, and let's talk about how it works here because you're really feeling a wrap of a series. And you often you often don't see it. You often don't see everything come together, but if it's the end, so you go for it.
Yeah, for me, the entire series, yes, it's important to collect the whodunit clues and follow and track the mystery, and all of that is fun for the reader for sure. But the series is really about grief and
Hmm.
belonging.
Hmm.
It's about a woman having to go through, life on her own for the very first time, where she's really has challenges and social cues, and
Hmm.
she has relied on her grandmother to navigate her world and her life. And she finds herself desperately alone. She learns to grow.
Hmm.
She learns to find family in the second book,
Hmm.
and to surround herself with people of quality and to understand the difference between people who are, users and abusers and
Hmm.
people who will be true found family.
Hmm.
So that by this book, now she's presented with all kinds of choices again about who she wants to be in the future and what values she's going to, pass on and live by.
Hmm.
And to me, that is the closure that we get for Molly. She is matured, she is smarter, she's self-aware, she has a confidence that she never had in herself at the beginning.
Hmm.
She feels good in her skin, and now she's going to have to choose what love is going to mean to her in the future.
Yeah. And what does security mean to her in the future? Because security to Gran was one thing. And what is security to her? And how much do you need to feel secure? And what makes you feel secure? And is it the job, one, whatever happens like next? What are the things that are going to make you? Because happy is being secure. Happy is feeling like the bottom's not going to fall out from under you. And I think that for you, in this book, you're showing it for Molly, it's the simple things. It's not hard to do these things. It's simple to find the exact right thing in life and to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she's really fortunate by the time we meet her in this book, and she gets even more fortunate. And that isn't about riches.
No.
That is about feeling secure in her work, a job that she was always loved, and feeling like there's room to grow in it, and embarking on a new adventure with somebody very important by her side.
Hmm.
And finally, and I think this is really key for her, understanding truly, for the first time ever, how she came to be.
Hmm. Right.
Understanding the woman who made massive sacrifices so that she could thrive.
Right. And even that woman thinking about should she let her mother back into her life or not? Like that was a big decision. Thinking of it, of saying, no, 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 you can't raise your grandchild. You are not capable of doing this. And I'm going to actually have to get to sort of disbar you from my family in order to protect this child. And it's a very interesting, because you read a lot about somebody who says, I just took the children away. I just took the children because I knew I could protect them better. It's a really big move to make, to have to go. The parents are not, they're not capable of taking care of this child. And I'm going to do it, but I have to do it better than ever because eyes are on me right now. Because it's like, why is the mother not raising it? And you, as a result, have to do it better because everybody's watching you, you know?
Yes, and with the stakes so high,
Mhm.
someone who is really different in a lot of ways, and who the world ostracizes
Yeah.
profoundly and has deep prejudices against, right?
Yeah. And so you're not teaching somebody who's like, oh, is she just sweet and adorable and all this stuff? No, they're challenges. And
They're
you've got to go in
challenging.
and fight for her. And you've got to
Yeah,
say, you're not going back to school. This is what you're going to go do instead. Yet you had such a grand education and you know what education meant to you. And you know how getting into university was the most important thing to you. And you have to adjust it with this child that that may not be the most important thing. And I think that that's a very big story about life because sometimes parents go in and they have this complete view of what's going to happen and the slate gets changed and then nobody knows what to do. It's like, wait a second, I didn't sign up for that one, That's a different thing. But
yes. Well, life has a habit of handing us things that we could never have guessed we would have been handed, right? And
no,
then we have to deal with it.
no. My niece was over yesterday with her daughter. Her daughter's 4 months old. And, everything was, oh, look, she's following with her eyes. Look how smart she is. Like all this kind of stuff. I'm just sitting there and it was like fun. Don't get me wrong. It was like a lot of fun to be doing that and seeing that and all that. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, we got a lot of expectations for this child right now, because they're the early days. And that's what you always have is an expectation that everything's going to be great. You know, we gave her a stack of books and we were so enlightened by how smart she was that when she left, my son's girlfriend goes, she should be reading those to us the next time we see her because we had constantly said, look how she follows. Because you're looking at this child that's sitting in this little car seat and she is following because there's all these new people in front of her. It's really, but that I saw as like what a parent says at that point. She's going to be doing this, she's going to be doing that. Look what she's doing now. And it where things change along the way. And
Of
that's the
course.
that's the that's the thing that Gran actually sees is it's not like I was even when I went to school. And it's not what her mother was this big disappointment. What are we going to do? I don't know. So what have you loved about writing mysteries? Because you were an editor. You never sat there and said, "Hey, I think I'm going to sit down someday and write a mystery." I mean, it didn't exactly go like that. What have you enjoyed about it?
I just think mysteries are a great vehicle because you have the engine, it's given to you. The whodunit is really simple.
Right,
It's not unlike the board game Clue.
right.
You've got a whole cast of characters, you've got a murder, you have to figure out who the suspect is and how they did it.
Right.
We know exactly what drives us through a mystery. Now, the joy about a mystery is what you wrap it up in.
Right.
And for me, that was the challenge. The hard part about the mystery genre is that there are so many people who have done it so brilliantly for so long.
Mhm.
There are the old masters. There's Agatha Christie, and there's Sherlock Holmes, and these great detective sleuths that so many authors have created, and that makes it really hard. So you have to ask yourself as a mystery writer, what can I do differently?
Mhm.
How can I, create a new story that is original and hasn't been quite done like this before? And for me, the answer to that was this voice of Molly, having her be an anti-detective in a lot of ways.
Right.
She's a terrible sleuth. In fact, when Sherlock Holmes goes into a room, he's going to go and figure out, oh, there's this little thing and that little thing, and he's going to see all the clues and understand right away, and then reveal to the reader all of the reasons why we didn't see anything and he saw with expert vision. And Molly is exactly the opposite. And
Mhm.
I was very conscious of that. That was a choice to me at the beginning to create a kind of new mystery sleuth, which on the surface of things, she's pretty bad at noticing clues.
Mhm.
The obvious is not something she can see, but the reader is going to collect those clues right away. And throughout that series, that has been true. However, what we start to learn as the readers of the series is that she has insight. She has a vision.
Mhm.
She can see things that we cannot. And together, only through her vision and our own, are we going to be able to solve these mysteries. So for me, it was all about finding that difference, finding an underlay to the mystery that might have something else
Mhm.
there as well. A story about grief, a story about belonging and finding family.
And a lot of times, mystery is a mystery. It's not going to be a story of this life and death kind of situation. It's not. Now, did you go back and read The Masters? Did you go back and read Agatha Christie or any of those books just to see how they did the arc of the story and traced, or what were you looking for from them?
Absolutely voraciously, but not only them. I went back and read Agatha Christie for sure.
Hmm.
And then I asked myself, how am I different? How is this voice that I'm trying to deliver different? And, I also read books like Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, by Gail Honeyman.
Hmm.
Why? Because that book is about a character who's so prickly. She's so unlovable. And at the beginning of the series, Molly is really challenging. There
Yes.
are moments where I challenge the reader, and you might want to shake her by the shoulders, and you might not be so fond of her. But what that book taught me, for instance, was, how to love a cactus.
Mhm.
It's prickly, but how do you hug that thing? And slowly over time, I realized that you can present a character who might seem very difficult to love at the beginning, move us through an arc and a journey
Mhm.
that will make us come to love them. And that really is the heart of this. I want you to go in, become Molly, maybe be frustrated with her a bit, but in the end, really live as her and come to love her.
Come to love her and figure out what she's doing. So I've got a question. Has there been film interest in this series or in the one of the books or whatever? Because I feel like now the way you've written it, you're giving them a script of like it's a limited series. It's like we can go from here to here. As anything, I mean, I do know that the moment of it's optioned is like a big, like, maybe. It's a big maybe.
Yes, options are always big maybes. They're super exciting, of course, don't get me
Yes.
wrong.
No, no.
And yes, there has been lots of movement. I can't say too much,
Right.
which is, also quite typical. But I am very hopeful that we will see this on the screen in the next few years. Here's hoping.
Yeah.
And for me, that will be tremendously exciting to see what the reader has put in your own mind, in your own imagination of the Regency Grand, to actually see that in Technicolor on the screen.
Mhm.
That for me is going to be the most exciting part.
And when I feel like if you've given it 3 years of story, because a lot of times when something is developed, the amount of time to spend in development on character, place, all those things, if you're going to invest that much in one, then do you have two more you can do it with? Do you have something else you can build it on? Is there a home that you can go to that becomes this other place? And the one thing you've got, one of the things you've got going on is you have very few places. There's the hotel. And what I've been told many a time is sometimes there are too many places in order to do this, or it's too big. The whole thing
Yes.
is too sprawling, requires too many characters. And as a result, to do this will be like ridiculous of trying to move the people from body to body. I mean, you just have to get that hotel up in Toronto that I love to agree.
Yes,
Empty,
exactly.
and we could just shoot there, please. But you know what I'm talking about. It's a contained kind of a thing, and I think that that's more of what they're looking for. I look at the success of The Pit that I just finished watching on Max. It's all shot in really this one big room in this. It's not in the ER, and you've got cast of characters there the whole time, but there's a place, and you go a little bit outside. But if you and I've started to watch differently. I've started to watch as much as I read critically. I'm watching critically to see why something can succeed, and you watch it and you see what's going on.
Well,
Like,
I think that's really astute. And I think that containment is so interesting because the film world often makes us think that it's that lack of containment that's actually the exciting part. But
right,
if you look at what you're talking about, or you look at a series like Adolescence,
right, right.
that feeling of stasis that leads to the explosion that we cannot stop watching. Or even The
Right.
White Lotus, it's set in a singular place. We aren't moving.
Right.
And sometimes that containment can allow for a bigger focus on character growth, right?
Bigger focus on what's going on. Adolescence, I happened on a Friday night late and ended up staying up till like 2:30, 3:30 in the morning because I couldn't stop watching. And I made documentaries before I started doing this job. And was really interesting to me was watch that one camera doing the whole thing is shot with one camera and over
Yes.
the shoulder and what you're doing and what that gives you as a view going in, moving around the room. And so many people are talking about that, but I said, are you talking about the filming of it as well as you're talking about the characters and what's going on with it? I just find it's fascinating to see when it's really good. And I think that what I'm seeing is when you this book is the same kind of a thing. It's like these four different stories, these four different things that end up happening, and you're seeing the progression of the character throughout and what's going on with the character. And you're seeing good moments with the character and moments that aren't that great with the character and where they move and whatever. But I'm watching more critically recently because I realize that watching is the competition to reading. So what's
100%.
I'm watching that's the competition. And I know
Yes.
it's not well in advance and but books are done well in advance too. So they're coming to market at the same time and what's working and what's not. So
Yes. Well, and I think the books that work and the series that work deliver a similar experience.
exactly. Exactly. It's like you want to feel like you're rooting for the people. We're watching the end of Bosch right now. Well, no, actually, my husband and I are watching the beginning because the show usually came out the week he was playing golf every year. So I'd watch the whole thing. I made the mistake of not hitting Legacy the other day and hitting the other one. And he goes, we're in a different story. And I was like, we're back at the beginning. And he goes, well, I want to watch this. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, all right, yeah, go for it. It's gonna be a lot of nights. There's a lot of nights doing this, blah, blah, blah. Has writing gotten any easier as time goes on?
I'm sure there are lots of people who want me to say yes, and that is not the answer.
I don't think it is. Yeah.
It is so hard, Carol. It is so hard to write. It is truly the hardest thing I've ever done, and also the most satisfying.
Hmm.
It is lonely. It is difficult. It's so easy to, in the labyrinth of story, to get lost
Hmm.
and to encounter monsters and demons and to not know your way to the end of the story. But there are days when you're in that flow state where it just comes and you are the characters. You
Right.
know them, you see them. It's happening as though it is a movie in your mind. And it just lays itself out with such ease. And those days you feel like you're a superhero. And the
Mhm.
next day you know nothing. And I love that. I love the fact that, even 4 books in, I feel like an absolute beginner.
Hmm.
And I remember my authors, many of my authors who have many, many books under their belts saying that, that finally you would never write another book if you didn't have that feeling.
Right. Right.
And I get it now, I get that feeling. It really is like going into a labyrinth and not knowing how you're going to get through this maze of story. And that can be a propulsive feeling that can move you forward. That means that you're in the right place.
Exactly. Were there things that were not in this book that on rereading you say, wait, I've got to shift this or I've got to move that? Or did your editor come back and say, wait, we've got to beef up this or we've got to beef up that? Or was it basically there?
I mean, the fundamental structure was there, but there's always things that need to move and change. For me, it's the breadcrumbs. It's like the first draft, what I place where and how I string the reader along is not, it doesn't come out on a perfect strand like a pearl necklace. That's not how it is. It's a bit clunky and the reader is asking questions I don't want them to ask, and you're not collecting the clues right. And then working with my editors, they make me aware of that. They help me fix it. They're being my best possible readers, which is finally what an editor is. It's your
Right.
best possible reader. It's protecting the reader's experience so that when it's shared en masse to all the readers out there, they have the best read they can.
Do you think, okay, so you went from being an editor to being an author. Is there anything you would share back to your editor friends at this point on what to do of working with an author? Is there something to do?
You know, it's it. it's another hard job being an editor. I must say it's been very humbling knowing that feeling of vulnerability before the maze of story.
Mm.
I was aware of it because I saw it. I confronted it. I saw it in front of me all the time in the form of my writers who, were clearly abjectly terrified and confused and dealing with authorial blindness because you don't know what you're doing when you're down there in that territory of story. And
Mhm.
I was, as an editor, felt like I was on a ladder outside of the maze and I
Right.
could see things that they couldn't see. And now that I know that, I really have an extra sensitivity to
Hmm.
that feeling of vulnerability.
Yeah.
It's the difference between knowing it and feeling it yourself. Those are two entirely different things. And so I do feel humbled by that. And if I ever do edit again, and maybe I will, maybe I won't, I don't know. I think I would I like to think I was gentle before. I would be much more gentle now.
Uh-huh. And you'd also see, because of writing, how you might contribute to how to fix the story even more. Because now you've been in that place. You're not just saying the direction of, I think you need to go do this. You've actually had to do it. And you've actually had to, so to give the direction, I think becomes a little bit easier when you're the person who's actually had to do it as well. And
Yes, for sure, for
be able
sure.
to
I
do,
mean, my technique was always asking questions, and it's the technique I use on myself. I feel like there's a little editorial me on my shoulder all the time,
right.
peppering me with questions. Is this the right scene? Is that the right beat? Why is this dialogue not working? Like constantly asking myself questions and being my own editor to try to get myself ahead in the manuscript.
Yeah, and then it's like you turn it in, you're like, wait a second, you have more questions? I thought the little person over here was doing it all. I thought we had it all under this is all under control. And then sometimes, did you ever know, like, I know this page isn't working. Let's see if we can pull this one off or not. Like, let's see what they, because sometimes friends of mine say, writer friends say, well, I want to see what somebody else says because I am so stuck on this. And maybe if they read the rest, they'll know what to do with this because I'm stuck. I really don't know.
Absolutely. That happens all the time. And sometimes you just have to get to that next stepping stone where you're like, okay, this scene, I know I'm on something. And there's a whole one afterwards. I don't know if I've landed it or not, but other people have to tell you that because you
Yeah.
do feel blind, you know?
Yeah, you're going into blind to what's going on to do. So, how long did the writing of this take? Did it take the usual year?
A little bit less than a year, yeah.
Year.
But yeah, around that.
Did you always know it was going to be called The Maid's Secret?
We went through all kinds of different titles. At one point, it was going to be The Maid's Key.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Which,
Yeah.
would have worked, but
Right.
in the end, we decided on the Maid's Secret, and I'm glad that it seems to have worked.
And I love the way you've got all the covers behind you also. And I like this at the diary, like right here. But I love the way the covers all work together. I mean, literally, you tell people to read in color order. It's like really, it's like which way to read this? Well, there's the yellow is the last, and begin with this, begin with that, blah blah blah. So the cover, I take it, came pretty easily as well because you had the basic design, and then what to put in the middle. Or am I
The
crazy?
cover for this book, yes, but
Yes.
the cover for the series, yeah, at the beginning, that was a challenge, right?
Yes.
And the question is, what do you do? Do you go in a milieu and have a cover that looks like some other writer who might be working in a similar space, or do something different? For
Right.
me, I knew that I wanted to do something really articulate to this world.
Right.
I wanted that sense of mystery displayed right from the get-go on the cover. I wanted something hidden and something shown.
Right.
And I wanted that Art Deco sensibility and that cleanliness of line, all that would reflect subtly, without saying so, the character herself.
Right. It completely does. Do the UK covers do the same thing, or is it different?
No, they're quite different. You can
They're really different,
see
right?
over
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
there, over
Yeah.
there, the blue one behind me.
Yeah. The blue one behind
That
you is, yeah, different. It's completely
It's
different.
very different. So the UK covers have a totally different sensibility. They're great. They're
Right.
wonderful.
Right. Different vibe.
But it's a different look entirely. Yeah.
Different look entirely. Blah, blah, blah. So Warren Ambrose has narrated all of the books, and I love that. And I was listening to the last one. Did you know from the start that her voice was right? Like, and he wanted her to continue because I feel like she just captures the character. Like I heard her voice and I heard Molly.
She nails it every single time. I remember when the audio people were coming to me and they presented me with very, very different choices
Right.
for a narrator. And there were several, and I listened to a few, and then I heard Lauren Ambrose's voice,
Yeah.
and it was instant. Like I just, had that spine tingling feeling like it's Molly. It's her. I hear her.
Right. Yeah.
And that was it. It was just like that is her. She is it. And I'm so grateful that she's continued on and delivered that voice for every book.
So here's a question. So, okay, you know you want Lauren. When you're writing the book and they're picking the pub date, on the audio side, are they trying to make sure for her availability? Because I've never really thought about that with a continuing voice. So they're saying, look, we're aiming for this book to come out here. We're going to do the audio here. Are you available? Lock down your time. And then you're trying to get the final book done before the audio.
Yeah,
Is
it's
that
a bit of
kind
a
of,
dance,
it
and a
is?
dance of schedules for sure. And also with this book, I was asked, like, there's two narrators here. Do
Right.
you want Lauren and somebody else, or do you want Lauren to do the whole thing? I'm like, Lauren. She,
Well, yeah, just through
she
her.
nails it.
Yeah, she nails it.
She nails both characters.
But I really think that's interesting to think about now because people say, well, why can't I figure out listen to the audiobook sooner? And I said, because the final has to be going to the printer, done with every change that's going to happen before you can start recording. Because if one word changes, you're going to have to go back and redo that section. And it's
Yeah,
an interesting
exactly.
dance because you've got to then have a narrator available. It's still got to be far enough out for production after that's done. So, and with the with audio becoming so much more popular with people, the dance has gotten even tighter of making sure it's
That's
available
very
same time.
true. That's very true. So, fortunately, in this case, it all worked
Yeah,
out. There weren't
yeah,
any major snafus. But in some ways, the audio is now almost like a translation,
it
right?
is. It is. Because I was very comfortable going back and forth because I'd be at the end of the chapter and I'd know if I started reading. And then if I got in the car again, I'd go to chapter 21 before I got out. Like I'd always look at where I was in the book and say, this is where I've got to go, which also means that chapter numbers matter in a print book because you've got to be able to get them lined up. And sometimes they're not there. And it's like, wait a second, this is going to be really difficult to track because they also say you can bookmark if you have something that's really exciting, but as a number of us have said, when you're driving down the highway, you're not exactly bookmarking. Like you're not going, oh, I want that later.
No.
I want that later. So it's hard for me to do. I try to read print usually when I'm doing an interview, simply
Yes.
because I'm going to need, where is that great line that she says about, we know we're not at the end. I'm going to need that line. So,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
okay. Now what's next for you? Do you have a next in mind?
I do. So I'm working on something else. It is entirely different. It is not a cozy mystery.
Cozy mystery. We're going a different
No.
direction.
Totally different direction. It is a mystery. But I always Frankenstein two things together.
Mm,
Always. That's what I do. So mystery with something, and I think of these books as mystery with uplit or
right.
uplifting literature is what the Brits call it. And in this case, I'm doing mystery thriller.
Mhm.
So what is similar, I would say, is every book that I write is about getting behind the eyes of a character, really
Mm,
experiencing living in their skin. And that is no different in this book, although the genre has changed a little bit. So, in this book, we encounter a woman in her 80s. She has lived in cottage country in Ontario, in Canada, all her life, living by a lake. And her grandkids come up to visit on Thanksgiving. They traipse about in the woods. They come back with something that she wanted to remain buried forever.
ooh.
And this changes the course of her life. It takes us back into a journey of memory from when she was a kid, and a teenager growing up on the lake, surrounded by a Somerset of very wealthy people.
Mhm.
And it is a novel really about wilderness, about the potential for nature to heal and to harm. It's
Mhm.
a book about sisterhood and about the unbreakable bond between sisters, one that can outlast death.
Mhm.
And it's about that journey back into the past where only, with some maturity behind our own eyes can we actually understand what happened to us,
Ooh, what happened back then?
what
Ooh,
happened back then. So that is what I'm doing now. obviously a very different kind of story because it is not a cozy. But if I do my job right, what the reader will experience that is similar is that living as this character, trying to understand her life, both present and past, you will hopefully come to love her.
Yeah, come to love her the same way. And also to you like playing with the past and the present and moving between the two. And that will be now, do you have timing for that figured out, or is it writing and then timing?
I think probably it'll be coming out in sometime in 2027, but I'm working on it. I'm not done yet. I'm right in the middle of the maze.
And also you're also traveling for this book, so that's not ending
Exactly.
anytime soon. It's another day, another city. Here we go again. Wheels up. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So can you write when you're on the road? Can you write for
I
the
can sometimes. Now, that hasn't proven true in the last couple of weeks, but I can sometimes. If I
yeah.
have a few hours, I can dive in.
You've had a really busy schedule. I mean, I've looked at your schedule and this is like your day off. This is the one day off. So, Nita, as always, it's been great, great, great talking to you. Look forward to seeing you sometime soon. But besides that, I'm really glad to hear that you've got a series that's so contained and so wonderful because sometimes you get somebody and they don't want to read 8 books. They don't want to read 20 books, but they want to be able to dive into something. And these books are packable to take on vacation. You can pick the 4 up, take them and go. And, really be having something to enjoy, but be able to come back with a full story. And I like that.
Oh, well, that's very lovely. Thank you for sticking with me through the whole series, me and Molly.
You and Molly. And I hope to see you in person soon and be able to continue our conversations about Molly and what's next.
I look forward to that.
And to everybody else, we look forward to seeing you next time on Book Reporter Talks to or having you listen on our podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.